Shanshan, let's start. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to have this event here. Jason Zhao from my Google, also Stanford honors student. I know him for a long time. He was interning in our team. Also, he became a PM, product manager in Google last year. So we have a lot of topics he would like to share with us. But for this one, because the summer is coming, we selected how to choose your summer activities as today's topic. Today we will give you a quick remark. Also, most time Jason will share his experiences, his ideas, and some advices to you how to choose the activities in the summer, because summer is so important as like your part of your life and study. Finally, I may give you a quick introduction on some programming activities might be your choice. Then we have some time saved to your questions. We have received more than a dozen questions. Before we start, I would like to give you a quick introduction about XCamp. For the XCamp, we most focus on the data structure and the algorithm teaching. We have students who have working hardly on the UCQ too, also in the International Olympiad informatics. So our kind of philosophy, we would like to help each student reach their potential. We would like to make the world a better place. Also, we believe let's work together and change the world with coding. XCamp was co-founded by me and my another Googler, Yuan. So the purpose, we try to help students from middle high school to learn coding at an early stage. I would like to pass to Shanshan, our market and admission lead, to talk about our series of the education forum. Shanshan.
Hi, everyone. This is Shanshan. I'm so glad to introduce our education forum to all of you. As you can see, this is our 22nd education forum. Since XCamp founded, we have one mission is help students and parents to form a strong community. So we currently have a variety internal and external sharing events. We invite different speakers to share the topic like coding, contests, reading, sports, and tech trends, and a lot of different topics. So if you are a current student or parents interested to join our event and would like to be a speaker, feel free to contact me or via our email, partner@xcamp.academy. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Shanshan. We have 22 this kind of talk already. We plan to have more. Please follow our messages and emails, and also our WeChat groups to get more information for the future topics. As I just introduced, now Jason, he's a product manager. It's different from software engineer, but his experience is also very important to share with us. He graduated from Stanford 2021 with honors in philosophy and computer science. He likes surf, play basketball, and hiking too. He also a college counselor. If you have some questions about the college application, he might help you too. Now I would like to turn to Jason. You may give me more background about yourself. Also, how do we prepare our activities in the summer? Jason, back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Charlie, for the introduction. And also I'm very honored to be here. I'm surprised I was invited because, I thought Charlie would be done with me after my experience interning with him, so I'm very honored to be welcomed back. I'm glad that Charlie still wants to interact with me. So thank you for having me here. And I'll try to, give this presentation as simply as I can, so I leave room for questions, but always feel free to interrupt me if there's anything along the way. So let's try this out. And please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, very clear.
Great. Okay. All right. So this talk is going to be obviously about how to choose your summer activities, but I also want to make a more general point about how I think middle schoolers and high schoolers can make the most of their free time, especially considering how rare that is during the school year. So Charlie already introduced me a little bit about me, so I won't go into detail here. And I will go straight into the presentation. I think the most important concept to
Jason,
yeah.
Jason, we only see the desktop, not the slides.
Oh, okay. Let me try this again. All right, is this working better?
Yes. Nice.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me go back. There, you didn't miss much. Okay, so the most important thing that I kind of want to ground my entire presentation on is the concept that summers are free time. It sounds pretty obvious at first, but I think it's really easy to miss out on how important summers are, because during the school year, you're working, you're going to school from 9 to 6, maybe you have some extracurricular activities. It's very straightforward and it's sort of hard to stand out. And so I think summers are this real opportunity where there's a lot of differences in how people choose to spend their time. And so when it comes time for college applications, or even just thinking about a career path, summers are really where you get to make a big difference, because everyone, they have an open ground to do whatever it is that they're interested in. And it's a really good time to really get ahead and really try new things that aren't common and that will really, open up new doors. So before I go into summer specifically, I also wanted to just bring some principles into play about how to make the most out of your time, whether it's in the summer or outside of the summer. And this is going to be related to a lot of things I'm going to talk about later. So just keep these in mind. You don't have to memorize them, but just keep them in mind as I continue the rest of the presentation. On the left side, you'll see a lot of problems I see with students, especially younger students, and how they approach using their time. And then on the right side are some of the ways I think that we can improve and build better habits around time management. So especially in high school, I noticed that a lot of students, especially really smart and ambitious students, they're trying to be good at a million different things, right? They have a bunch of different things on their resume. They're doing a lot of different extracurriculars, maybe even playing sports, instruments, all that. I think the most important thing to take away is that that's actually not a very efficient use of time. Being exceptional at one thing is often a much more rewarding and fun experience rather than trying to stack a bunch of activities on the resume. Another mistake that's closely related is that students will spend a lot of time competing, and that obviously competition isn't necessarily bad, but I think it's worth considering what things you can do that are totally unique. So maybe one example would be, instead of joining a writing competition or a coding competition, you can also consider building your own software project, right? And maybe you can build an app that has never been done before. So the rest of I'm not going to go into detail on the rest of them, but I think you can read the slides for yourself and get the idea that the main point I'm trying to make here is that time management is really important. And it's really important that you do something that you're genuinely interested in, rather than trying to seem interesting or trying to collect a bunch of different titles. Optimizing for impact, optimizing for interest, and optimizing for uniqueness are going to allow you to make the most out of your free time. Okay, and now I'm going to talk specifically about the summer, but before then, I want to play this video. Please let me know if you can't hear the audio.
There's 104 days of summer vacation, and school comes along just to end it. So the annual problem for our generation is finding a good way to spend it. Like maybe building a rocket, or fighting a mummy, or climbing up the Eiffel Tower. Discovering something that doesn't exist, or giving a monkey a shower. Surfing tidal waves, creating nanobots, or locating Frankenstein's brain. It's over here! Finding a dodo bird, painting a continent, or driving our sister insane. Idiot! As you can see, there's a whole lot of stuff to do before school starts this fall. Come on, Barry! So stick with us, cause Phineas and Ferb are gonna do it all. So stick with us, cause Phineas and Ferb are gonna do it all.
Mom! Phineas and Ferb are making a title sequence!
All right. Okay, so that was...
There's 104 days of summer.
Let's not go that again. That was, a pretty random, but it's actually a TV show that I really enjoyed from my childhood called Phineas and Ferb. And it's basically the whole story is about what these two kids get up to in the summer. And the reason I wanted to show it is because I think it really highlights some of the principles that I was trying to outline earlier. When you look at what Phineas and Ferb are doing, they're doing a bunch of random stuff, like going to space or like painting buildings that people have never done before. It's very interesting. And they're not really optimizing to do the same things that everyone else is doing. They're not like doing SAT prep necessarily the whole time. They're following their interests and they're having fun. And I think that's a really overlooked part of how to have a successful summer. Obviously, there is definitely room to do traditional things, and I'll talk about that as well. But one really important idea that I want to
There's 104
is that summers are for storytelling. More than anything, why Phineas and Ferb is so appealing and why they're such a successful TV show is because they spent their free time in a way that allows them to tell interesting stories. And when it comes to college admissions, when it comes to pretty much anything in life, whether it's career, college, or just getting ahead, I genuinely believe that stories are much more important than statistics. Speaking from my expertise from the college admissions perspective, having seen what admissions officers do, right? They are reading maybe thousands and thousands of admissions essays every day. So they spend maybe 3 minutes on each application. That maybe like 3:21 p.m. to 3:24 p.m. is what they spend on yours. And in that time, it's really important that you come off as a human, that you come off as a story that is memorable and not as a series of stats of like, oh, I was like 6th in this and I was 7th in this and I spent 15 hours on that. The story is what it's all about, right? And at the end of the day, stories are basically all that matter. The story that you can tell about yourself is going to be important because that's how people see you. They don't see you as a collection of statistics or as a resume. They see you by the stories that you can tell. Okay, so basically what summer is about and what I think how you can make the most out of it is using the summer as free time in order to determine what stories you can tell and to tell better stories. So before I talk about specifics of how to spend summertime and also how I spent my summers, I want to really dive deep into some principles that I think will be important, not just for summer, but for everything. And again, please feel free to, just unmute yourself and ask any questions. I'm just going to go straight ahead because I know that we have a lot of questions and I want to make sure we get to those. Okay, so rule number 1 is to be a sentence and not a paragraph. What does this mean? I think it's best illustrated by the 1 sentence rule, which is when you think about anyone that you respect or admire in society, the way that you describe them to a friend is you just need a sentence, right? You want to describe Steve Jobs. Oh, Steve Jobs was the person who invented the iPhone. If you want to describe Michael Phelps, well, he's the best swimmer of all time. So the core principle here is that you don't need to do 5 or 6 different things. People don't remember paragraphs. When you're thinking about stories, what is the 1 sentence that you can tell? And I think what this exercise helps get to is like, how are you going to be remembered? You can spend hours and hours of your life doing something, but if it's not memorable, or maybe if it's not coherent, it's going to be very hard to be a single sentence. You're going to be a paragraph, and people don't remember that. Closely related to the sentence idea is to be a T-shaped and not O-shaped. So one thing that Google and elite colleges, and I'm sure many elite high schools and summer programs as well have in common, is that they're actually not looking for well-rounded people. They're looking for people that are T-shaped. And what that means is that you have a spike. A spike is essentially something that really sets you apart, that makes you an expert. And so instead of being well-rounded in a variety of skills, but not really standing out in anything, being a T means that you have a basic knowledge of many things, but you are also an expert in one thing. And so you can take your knowledge of other things and really allow your expertise to show using that spike. So I think that's another thing to remember. And it kind of goes with being memorable, being able to be described in a sentence. A third rule is to be cohesive. Remember one of the principles I talked about how to spend your time is to not try to do a million things, right? And one of the reasons why is because when you're doing all these different things and spending your time working hard in many different directions, it's very hard to be cohesive. If you're doing an instrument and playing sports and coding and doing volunteering and trying to prepare for the SAT, well, not only is that going to be very stressful, when you present yourself to me, it's going to be very hard for me to make sense of like what you care about, right? Like, what is your story? It just seems like you're doing all these random things. So with being T-shaped, with being a sentence, it also pays off to make sense and be cohesive and tie all these things together. Okay, so some people will say, well, this is like very general advice and that's great, but what if I don't know what I want to do? And I think that's one of the biggest questions, and it's a really great question to ask, because how can you be T-shaped? How can you be memorable if you're still exploring different ideas and like trying to figure out where your interests lie and where your skills lie? So the next few principles are kind of based on this question and will help you answer that. Rule number 4, and this especially applies to summers because you have so much free time, is to cast a wide net and then reel it in. What does that mean? In the first few summers you have in high school, maybe the one after freshman year and after sophomore year, I recommend you say yes to everything. You just try as many different experiences as possible. And then as you're trying these things, pay attention to the intersection of what you like and what you're good at. And you'll find that it's actually relatively rare, right? Maybe you're good at everything. I certainly wasn't. But for me, I think one thing I realized was like, I have very unique interests, and I wasn't interested in a lot of things that I initially tried out. So I think what's really important is that you give give yourself the chance in the early summers to try as many different things as possible. And then you aggressively cut down on the number of activities that you can be experts in these activities. But I think it's important to, you know, have the two-sided equation of like trying different things and then eventually cutting down to one. The next rule is that opportunities grow exponentially. And one thing I've learned here is that people are the key to pretty much everything. In high school, I got really interested in entrepreneurship, and that kind of led me to technology at Stanford and now at Google. And also how I met Charlie is because I actually spent a lot of time when I was in high school in the early years emailing random people. So I would email them and ask them if I could work for them. I had no experience and no skills. And honestly, they were doing me a favor to let me intern for them. But it was through these emails that I was able to actually get a few random internships, work in a real office, and meet people who are in the professional world working on startups when I was maybe like 14 or 15. And every single person I met, I would just ask them like, who are 2 or more people that might be interesting to talk to? And from there, you can really grow your opportunities and your network exponentially. And this doesn't apply just to entrepreneurship, but I think it applies to research, right? If you maybe know a professor, have a family friend who's a professor, maybe you do research with them and then ask them, hey, do you know of any other professors or PhD students that I can do research with? The earlier you do this, the better. And you'll be able to access opportunities that just other people wouldn't have been able to access simply because, you know, 1 or 2 years ago, you sent that random email. Another concept that I kind of touched on earlier when I was talking about the principles of how to use your free time is that competition is overrated. What does this mean? Well, competition is, you know, doing something that already exists. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a core importance part of any journey. But when you want to compete, it means you're entering a space where there's very many people who are often very smart and willing to work very, very hard. So, you know, at the end of the day, there can only be one number one in anything, right? And, you know, if you're number 7, you might have worked really, really hard, but it's hard for people to notice that and to respect that, even though it is a very challenging thing to get to that level. I think what can be more fun, more interesting, and more educational, as well as more memorable, is to try to take the skills that you learn from competition or from school and apply them to something brand new, where no one else is competing against you. I think a great, just to go back to the kind of example I gave earlier, maybe instead of, you know, writing for a competition, you can start your own blog, right? That's one example of you are taking something that you like to do and making that something brand new because you have a specific platform that shares your specific insights and it's not competing with anyone else. Okay, next principle is that creation is generally better than consumption. Again, what does this mean? Creation is the process of producing something new, using your own knowledge and creating something. Consumption is intaking existing knowledge. So school is basically 99% consumption, right? You're reading textbooks, you're going to lecture, you're maybe assigned some readings for homework, and you're consuming all this information. But I think something really important that I noticed is that the people who are most successful in their careers and in college admissions are people who take the things that they consume and spend a lot of time actually creating. So obviously you have a limited amount of time in your summers and in general, and you want to balance how you consume and how you create. But in general, I think it's better to bias towards over creating than over consuming, because at the end of the day, the creation will be more fun. It'll be more interesting. And I actually think that you'll learn more by trying to do something new that you wouldn't have learned just by reading books. So getting to a base level of knowledge and then trying to go out there and create knowledge yourself is a great way to spend your time. And then lastly, I just wanted to kind of end with the principle of discomfort, right? Like this means always pushing your comfort zone. And I know it's not easy. It's very, very comfortable to kind of just look around and do what other people are doing. And I think it's important to, get advice from other people, but you should also ask yourself, this summer, am I trying something that makes me a little nervous? Am I trying something that's like maybe pushing my skills a little bit, or maybe even just applying to things where maybe I don't think I can get in, maybe I don't think I'm qualified, but just trying just to see what happens. And I think if you ask yourself every day, like, did I try something today that made me a little nervous, that pushed my boundaries a little bit? And the answer is yes. Every single day, you're getting 1% better. Well, over the course of a year, you've gotten, 20, 30, 40% better. And over the course of 4 or 5 years, you've gone places that other people can't, just because every single day you did one small thing that pushed your comfort zone. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there, and then I promise I'll talk about concrete summer stuff right after this, but I wanted to see if there's any immediate questions to anything I just said. Okay, I will take that as a no. All right, so moving forward, again, feel free to interrupt at any point. Here are some very broad ideas for summer activities. And again, these aren't formulas, because I think one of my core beliefs is that following a formula is very rarely the path to success. There's no magic number of like classes and research and internships that will get you where you need to go. There's no, do internship early in college or early in high school and then do a class later in high school and that will be successful. I think it's very dependent on your own journey. But in general, the things I've personally had experience with and seen other people do, one is classes. The first form is taking classes at your own school to get credit so that you can maybe go to a more advanced class next year, or classes at an external program. So this could be things like XCamp. This could be like Yale Global Scholars. There's a lot of different programs that offer different sorts of classes. The next is competitions. And these are mainly club competitions. So for example, I was involved in the Healthcare Occupation Students of America. So that's a healthcare club. And I went to a national competition to kind of compete on health news. And so that's something I did one summer, and it was quite interesting. So you can obviously like extend your club interactions from the school year to more intense involvement in the summer. And then there's SAT prep, which is self-explanatory, research with professors, skill-based camps. Again, XCamp is an example, volunteering, self-explanatory, and then doing an internship, which again, you might need to do some cold emailing or tap into your network, but I really encourage you to, don't think that an internship is out of the picture, because I think you can get an internship as a freshman in high school. You just need to be willing to try and ask. And then lastly, your own thing. And I'll go into an example of like what I did that was my own thing over the course of one of my summers. So this is just basically like the universe of things you can do. I'm not going to tell you what is best. But in general, follow these principles for your summers. The more unique that your activities are, the better. The more focus that they show in terms of how does this individual experience in this summer contribute to my overall story, my overall T-shape, the overall profile that I'm building, the more focused it is and more coherent it is, the better. And then I think this sounds obvious, but it isn't always obvious, is that the more fun and interesting and meaningful you find it, the better. And what I mean by that is if you're looking at your summer plans and you're thinking, wow, I can't wait for school to start because this is going to be so much work, you should probably reassess your summer plans. Summer is supposed to be fun. And I think, you just end up with more interesting results when you follow your passions. So don't underrate that aspect. If summer feels like a chore, if it doesn't feel like a break from school, then reassess what you're doing. Okay. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about two types of summers. And spoiler alert, these are actually how I spent my summers in high school. So I can actually talk personally about, why I did what I did and what were the pros and cons. So summer one, it's kind of a lie. This was over the course of 2 summers, but for simplicity, I'm just going to call this summer one. What I did my first 2 summers in high school, I went to 2 national club competitions. So I thought I wanted to be a doctor early on. Again, I was exploring a lot of different things early on, as I recommend. and I attended a healthcare competition over the summer for HOSA. I was also very involved in Latin, and I still, love the Roman language and Roman history. So I also went to a national convention for Latin Club. And then I also took a community college course, which helped me advance through one class in my high school. It gave me that credit, which was helpful because I was able to focus more on the sciences in school during the school year. I also did some SAT prep my freshman and sophomore summers, which was really helpful. And finally, I spent a few weeks at a stay away camp volunteering each summer. And then as I said, I did some internships at startups just by doing some cold emailing during my freshman and sophomore years. This may seem like a lot, but to be honest, most of these things were like 1 week programs. So if you look at all that, that's maybe like 6 or 7 weeks over the course of 2 summers. So I wasn't actually that busy. But again, going back to the principle of casting the net wide, I really did cast the net wide, and I tried a lot of different things, and I don't regret any of that. But one of the downsides of having this type of summer is that you lack focus, right? If you look at this list and ask yourself, like, what type of person does this stuff? It makes no sense. I'm doing a healthcare club. I'm doing Latin club. I'm doing American history. I'm volunteering. It's just scattered all over the place, right? So there's like this whole list of things, but if someone reads this, they're not going to know, like, what are my interests? Like, why am I doing all these different things? It's going to be very hard to remember. It's not going to be like, oh, Michael Phelps, he's the best swimmer ever. It's not as simple as that. And so that's kind of the downside. So I recommend that earlier on in your maybe first or second summers in high school, try to cast your net wide, but important thing is to eventually get that focus and be able to tell that story and show that you have a T-shape. So this was my junior summer. After my junior year, I realized pretty early on after sophomore year, doing some internships, that what I was really interested in was startups, and I really cared about technology and entrepreneurship. And that was the one activity which I found like this was super meaningful. Sometimes studying for the SAT and like doing all these other clubs, it felt like a chore. Like I was just doing it for my resume, but doing the internship, I was excited. Like it was something that I was eager to do and didn't feel like work. And so my junior summer, I decided to really dive deeply into that one thing, that one meaningful thing, and really make that my spike and my T. So I applied and was fortunately accepted to an entrepreneurship program. Originally, it was only at MIT. Now LaunchX is everywhere, but I went to MIT and I basically did this one thing for like 6 or 7 weeks and essentially started a company. It was like sort of interesting. It was sort of serious. Like we had some money, we had some users, but more than anything, I think it was just like, it blew my mind that this was possible for me at that age. And more than anything, it really allowed me to like focus in on one thing and really deliver and go deep on that, something that no one else has done. Thousands of students every year go to competitions, but not that many people are creating their own startup in the political activism space. And if you look at just my activity list, there's only one thing. I only did this one thing, but I went deep into it and I was able to show the impacts. So when you look at this and you try to describe, this resume of what I did this summer, it's very easy. It's someone who's very interested in entrepreneurship and had a certain level of success in it. Whereas if you go back, summer number one, this makes no sense, right? So this is kind of how I narrow things down and, developed my spike through my summers. That's basically all I had to say. I think the one thing that I want you to get out of this is the theme song, Phineas and Ferb. If anything, your summer should look like that. They should be fun. They should be things that are meaningful to you. They should be exciting, and they should be brand new. And you should be able to tell an interesting story about it, just like Phineas and Ferb have been doing for the past decade. So that's all I really have to say. I'll close out with just, an invitation. If you're interested in working with me, I'm opening up a few spots for a few students for personal college coaching. And my email is right here. You can email me anytime or visit my website and just see what I have to offer. But that's all I wanted to say, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Let's we have plenty of time. I think we have a lot of questions too. So let's start the Q&A session now. Yeah, parents, students. We have like a hybrid Q&A session. So if you like ask question, just open your mic and ask Jason directly. At the same time, because before the meeting we have collected dozens of questions. We might answer the questions from the list too. Okay, I will turn to Shanshan. I think you have these questions pre-collected.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Jason. Sherry. Okay, I will start the question first. Any camp for profoundly gifted kid? Yes.
Sorry, what was the question? Could you repeat that one more time?
Yes. Any camp recommendation for profoundly gifted kid?
I see. Yeah, so I'm sure you know, this whole presentation was for profoundly gifted kids, because I'm sure everyone here is profoundly gifted. So it's hard for me to give a specific example without knowing more, but let me just call out some of the camps that I've heard about and the ones that I've interacted with and have heard good things about, either through my own personal experience or through watching my friends do it. I guess I'll try to bucket them. In the tech realm, some of the most interesting camps are at MIT. There's RSI, I'm sure you guys have heard of that, but there's also other programs at MIT. I think MITES is one of them, so MITES. That's another program that's MIT for engineering and research. And in general, if you just search up MIT engineering summer programs or research programs, you'll find a lot there, and there's a lot of potential. One other note on the engineering and research side, don't be afraid to create your own sort of summer program. And this kind of goes with what I've been saying about creating your own story and doing something new. Go and email some professors. The professors, their job is to teach. And so, you know, usually they don't get that many emails from high schoolers asking to do research with them. So at the very least, they'll read your email and they'll be impressed. I actually had no robotics experience in high school, and I spent maybe 30 minutes finding the email of every robotics professor at UT Austin. And I sent them all an email that was basically saying like, hey, I'm interested in robotics. Can I work with you? And I got maybe like 3 replies out of 30, and 2 of them were no, and 1 of them was yes. So I was able to meet this professor in person and work with him. So there's no way I would have been accepted to RSI. I didn't have that much technical backgrounds, but you can make your own experiences. And then from there, once you know you've worked with one professor, well, they'll be happy to introduce you to the best programs or another professor that you're interested in. So don't be afraid to choose your own adventure and like do your own thing. That's on the research side. On the humanities side, one of the most interesting programs is called TASP. I don't remember what it stands for, but I do remember the T stands for Telluride. If you just search up TASP, it's a very interesting program that really focuses on humanities and building a community over the summer. It's very well respected. The admissions rates are quite low. So it's a very prestigious program. And then lastly, I have to say LaunchX, because I did it myself and I had a great time, and it was a very instrumental part of my own development. If you're interested at all in entrepreneurship, I really recommend you look at that camp. It really opened my eyes to like what was possible. But again, entrepreneurship is about doing things that no one else has done. And don't be afraid to start your own app without a program, or build your own website without a program. So you can do those things at any time, whether it's in the summer or in the school year.
Yes, thanks, Jason. So the next question, for a 9th grader, is it advisable to take the SAT exam during the coming summer? He's in Algebra 2 math class currently.
Great question. So my advice is to take the SAT as soon as possible. And note the as possible, right? As soon as you're comfortable. Don't rush it, because at the end of the day, what's most important is what you got on the SAT, not when you took it. They don't care. But the reason why I say try to do it sooner rather than later is not because the time matters, but because getting that sort of mental barrier and worry about, oh, I have this big exam I need to do and study for, the earlier you get rid of that, the better you can focus on other things. So I actually took the SAT in my sophomore year. I did well on that, and I didn't need to think about that for the rest of my life, which is great. And my friends were worried about this all throughout sophomore year and junior year, and some even into senior year. So during the critical moments of like preparing for college applications or doing like these really prestigious summer camps after your junior year, they were thinking about the SAT. Whereas I had thought about that my freshman summer, prepared for that, and then took it my sophomore year. So I think if you feel prepared and you don't have anything else that's super interesting, one good thing to do is get those tests out of the way early. so that you can free up the rest of your time to not have that worry and to explore more freely.
Yes. Okay. The next question. How to find independent research projects priority to junior and senior year? I think, yeah.
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit, so I might be sounding like a broken record. I think a few steps, right? Like number one, ask your parents if they have any coworkers that are professors. I find that my parents just randomly know a bunch of people who are professors. I don't know if this is a common experience, but it's worth a shot, right? Maybe they can connect you with a friend of a friend who knows a professor. It doesn't have to be a direct connection. That's number one. Number two is I would also approach your teachers and ask if they have any connections, especially if you're in a robotics program or if you participate in X Camp. I'm sure that there's resources there. Go out and reach out to your mentors and other adults that are closely working with you in your life to see if they have any connections. That's number two. And then number three is go online and find something you're interested in researching and find as many professors as you can, preferably like your local community or even a community college. And just make an Excel spreadsheet or Google Doc list of like 50 to 100 emails. It's actually not going to take as long as you think. It might take like a couple hours. And then create an email template that says, something about why you're interested in the professor, what your current background is, and what you want to do with the professor. And if you can just, write a 2 or 3 sentence email template that you can send to each of these emails, trying to personalize it a little bit on each one, you can maybe reach out to 100 professors in the course of 3 or 4 hours. And that's really powerful because, you might not get much replies, but if you just get one yes, that's all it takes. And I'm pretty sure with 100 emails, you'll get one yes. So you can almost guarantee that you'll get something interesting with 3 or 4 hours of your time. So those are the 3 steps I would try. And obviously, if that doesn't work, there are thousands and thousands of professors out there. Someone will say yes to you, I promise.
Thanks. So the next question is, how do you find your motivation? I think this will be a very critical question, right? To all the students.
Important. It's very important. I think this is probably a parent that's asking this question. sounds like a parent. But no, it's a great question and one that I get pretty often. My personal experience actually is pretty interesting. So I used to play a lot of video games. Parents don't really like it when kids play video games. I played a lot, and yeah, I just spent a lot of time watching TV, playing iPad, playing computer. I still honestly love video games, so that's never changed. I think the important thing to understand, like, I guess from a parent's perspective, I think the most important thing that you can do, and I think that my parents and some other parents I've seen have done a really good job of doing, is just letting your kids basically pursue their interests, right? And that sounds really generic because like most kids aren't interested in doing math homework. That's not very interesting. I never found it that interesting. But take a broader view, right? Maybe it's not video games, but maybe it is something like coding video games. I've seen so many successful engineers at Google and elsewhere who love playing video games, spend all their time playing video games. And one day they realized like they can build video games. And now they spent their whole time learning coding languages, programming. I mean, video game programming is very, very hard. And a lot of the people who do that are some of the best engineers in the field. And so think outside the box on like what an interest can consist of, because there are many different things that I think can lead to interesting motivations. But the most important thing is like, you can't force motivation. That's discipline. You can force discipline. That's what they have in the army, right? They force you to wake up, otherwise you get slapped or something. But that's very different from motivation. And I think when you think about motivation, you have to think about, is this fun? Like, am I actually enjoying this? Does this feel like work? If it feels like work, then it's probably not motivation. And then for students, I think something important to realize is just the flip side of the same thing, right? Get outside of what the world expects you to do. I think I felt a lot of pressure to do certain things in order to get into a good college. And there's a lot of competition in my high school for grades. The SAT is very competitive. College admissions, especially for Asian Americans, can be very, very competitive and very cutthroat. So you can easily feel a lot of pressure, and that feels overwhelming. And no one wants to just like do 15 extracurriculars after school every day. That's not fun. What I realized in my time that helped me gain motivation is I started to pay a lot of close attention to asking myself, did I really ever have fun doing any of the things I was doing? And also, was I actually naturally that good at it? And with those two filters, you can filter out maybe like 80% of the things that you do. I mean, at least from my experience, right? Like I filtered out HOSA, I filtered out Latin Club, I filtered out math competitions, coding competitions, I filtered out sports. I mean, I guess I wasn't really good at sports. I'm interested in sports, but if you're not good at it and you're not interested in it, then cut it out of your life and spend your free time doing things where the answer to, am I enjoying this? Am I having fun? Is yes. Don't let the expectations of like having to get into good college prevent you from doing the things you want to do, because the whole point of going to college is to continue doing things that you like to do. If you go to college, it doesn't matter how good of or bad of a college and you have no interests, you are not going to get anything out of that college. Whereas if you pursue your interests, it doesn't really matter what college you go to, actually. Like, I think it's very easy to be successful if you have something that you genuinely drives you. So I would say like find motivation by really listening to yourself and asking yourself hard questions about how interested you are in something.
Thanks. Actually, lots of SCAN students, they love the playing games, but we directing their interest into coding. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Perfect.
yeah, really in the platinum division. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the next question, how to get into the summer school of university? Yeah. Also.
I see. I think one of, it's hard for me to say because they're so different. But some things that I would particularly try to think about and invest time in considering before you apply is what makes me unique. Look at it from the admissions officer perspective. What story is this person telling me, right? If you're a high schooler, chances are you have not solved cancer, you probably haven't worked, so you don't have a lot on your resume, right? So think about what the admissions officers are using to differentiate you from the 500 other people that they're going to read. And this comes down to storytelling. Usually what determines success in summer camps, when high schoolers are applying, because they don't have a lot of background, the things that distinguish people are very small. And your grades, high schools are all different, so it's hard to distinguish on grades. So what really matters is what story you tell. And by that specifically, I mean, how can you show this camp that you are the most interested, genuinely interested in whatever you are going to learn? If you are going to go to an American history camp, it's not really that important, like, oh, how good are my chemistry grades? That's not going to matter. What's going to matter is, oh, maybe you write a story or an essay about how you spend your weekends going to the American History Museum and have done volunteering there. Try to craft a narrative that brings all the things that you love doing together and shows why you are uniquely interested and uniquely suited to be the right person to be in this camp. And this goes back to a few principles that I try to emphasize over and over again, which is follow your interests. If you have to make up a story about how you're interested in American history to go to a summer camp around American history, maybe you shouldn't go to that summer camp. Right. So follow your interest, number one. Number two is try to make your activities and your extracurriculars coherent. If you're doing Latin club and soccer and violin, it's hard to tie all these three things together. You can't really tell a good story with that. But if everything I do is like history related or, going to museum to help like clean old artifacts or, watching a lot of YouTube videos on history or even writing a blog about history, like if all these things are super easy to connect together, they just show that someone's genuinely interested in something, and that's going to make them stand out regardless of what else they have on their application.
Okay, next question. Is it a good idea for high school students to do some part-time job, make money during the summer?
I think so. Yeah. So I think there's two kinds of jobs you can kind of get as a high schooler. One is like a real job. You are working at Safeway or the supermarket, you are a barista at Starbucks, maybe something like that. I think that is one of my biggest regrets, is that I never did that. And I really wish I did, because I think being able to see a variety of people from all walks of life and being able to interact with them with like a cheerful and mature demeanor is just so important and undervalued, and also rare in college students and even beyond. I really wish I did that. So I'd highly recommend doing that, especially like earlier on, maybe freshman year. That's something that's very valuable and very unique. Another thing that you could do is doing an unpaid internship. That's kind of the path I went down, which is I emailed a bunch of startups. I also highly recommend this. I think doing an internship, networking your way into an internship is one of the highest value things you can do in your summers, because it's going to be so unique and it's going to teach you things that other people won't learn. And it's not just limited to tech. If you're interested in medicine, you can go shadow a doctor or volunteer at a hospital, which is something I did when I was exploring healthcare. So I think I would recommend both doing a real job that pays you money and also trying to find internship opportunities that let you see what your interests are in the real world when applied to a career. I think both those things are very, very important.
Thanks. I think the next question will be turned to Charlie. Does SCAM offer online summer camp for middle schoolers?
Yes. For XCAM's class, we start, most of students start from 6th grade. So the middle schoolers are the kind of most of our students here now for the beginning class. Yeah, for the other ones, we have most like high school students. For the summer camp, we have a weekend class. It's from the introduction to middle level and to the highest level. Also, we have a whole day camp. It's at the end of July. We have a introduction level. Also, we have a UCCO competitions at all these levels from bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Yeah, please go to our website. You can have more information.
Thanks, Charlie. And next question, what's the best summer program for a beginner? I think, yeah, student in 8th grade. Yeah, for the beginner.
Is this for Charlie or for me?
I think the question is maybe not pretty clear, right? Best summer program. Maybe we can go to the next. If the parents are in the Zoom, you can ask later, right? What's the best way to learn coding? Charlie.
Yeah, maybe that's the way to me. Coding depends on different levels. For some elementary school, it's just a scratch. But when to the middle school, there are some as Jason mentioned, there's some web development, and mostly if one the students get deeper in the coding, algorithm and data structure is the key for the student to practice and get the capabilities of coding and thinking and analytical programming. So yeah, if you kids are interested, let's see. I think the interest is the key. Let's see which level is interest. If just for fun, just at the introduction level, but if they want to do some competitive coding, definitely there's a lot of opportunities. And in general, some kids might be good just think and plan for the career as a software engineer. If they plan earlier, they will have more opportunities, especially to study computer science in college. And then because they have the solid foundation, they can do better in college also to find a job.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Next question also goes to you. When is a good age to start UCCO training?
For the UCCO, the competitive one, from our experience, like 6th and 7th grade is a good start. Usually it takes some time for the students to get the different levels.
Okay. Next one, yes. Which SCAM summer program should we choose for an 8th grader with no coding experience but very good at math?
For our some program, summer camp, we have the introductory like 101. It's mostly for the students without coding experience, but may have a good math background. Also, if you have the time, you can join our weekend class. We have placement tests. We can find the best class for him.
Thanks, Charlie. Next question goes to Jason. Why do you switch major from philosophy to CS? Yeah,
that's funny because that's what my dad asked me too. So it's a good question and one that I'm used to answering. I think a couple of things. Well, number one is I actually continue to do CS. I just got a master's degree in CS. I transferred some of the units that I had for my undergrad to a master's degree. So I was able to still graduate with the CS degree, which I felt was a pretty good trade-off and a good compromise. But more interesting and I think more relevant is I genuinely felt like I learned more in my philosophy classes at Stanford than I did in my computer science classes. To me, This is just my personal opinion. I felt like I could learn a lot of coding by doing internships like the one I did with Charlie. I found that, just doing coding on the job in the wild in real life applications, that was really instructional to me. And I realized, well, I'm in school for 4 years. If I'm learning this material in computer science better outside of school, then why am I spending, so much money or my parents' money on Stanford? And I realized, to study philosophy, which has always been one of my interests since high school, that's not something that is easily obtainable outside of college. Whereas coding knowledge, of course, as you know, you're obtaining it right now outside of college, it can be done. And so I felt like it was so unique to be able to pursue like an interest I had that could only be done in school. And it was really once in a lifetime opportunity. And I just felt like I connected with my professors more. They're smaller classes. I learned more about life. And I was really glad I was able to get both the philosophy and the computer science experience in one college experience.
Thanks, Jason. Next question. Yeah. Is it better to take extra classes in the summer or to have some different activities to develop kids' interests? How can I organize my summer vacation in high school?
Okay, so I guess those are two questions. One is how whether to take classes or to do other sorts of activities.
Yes.
In general, I will go so far as to say like almost 85 to 90% of the times it is better to not do the classes. And the reason why I say this is because it's very uninteresting from a college applications perspective to do classes. So unless you absolutely need to take this class, maybe you like didn't get a good grade on it in school and it's ruining your GPA or something like that, unless you have a very, very good reason for why you're taking a class, in general, it's better to produce something in the summer. And this goes back to the consuming versus producing. A lot of people, they just treat summer as like another quarter of school or like another semester of school. But then you kind of miss out on the benefits of summer, which is that it's like Phineas and Ferb. It's free time. It's time to explore and do something that other people aren't doing. And taking classes is just like doing school all over again. So it's very hard to like stand out that way. So in general, I advise you to like try doing something else. If it's a competition, if it's a camp, just something that you wouldn't be able to do in school. And then on the question of vacations, I don't really know. I would say like what I found helpful for scheduling my vacations in the summer was either right after school ends or right before school begins, so that I have the whole summer to like fully explore. I find like if it's split up in the middle, I can't really like work on one big continuous project. That's just my general advice.
Thanks. The next question maybe can to both of you. The student is in 5th grader. Would you recommend some camps for middle schooler? Yeah, who go first? Maybe Jason?
I'm sure X Camp has some great offerings, so I'll let Charlie talk about that. My personal experience is that I actually didn't do too much in my middle school summers, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, just because, I felt like I was able to just do fun things in those summers, and it wasn't like very important for high school. So one thing I did during those summers that I thought was valuable though was I volunteered a lot. I spent a lot of time volunteering that helped me just understand the world better. It helped me develop my interest going into high school. So I had a good idea of like, hey, these are things I'm interested in continuing to volunteer for. Maybe I'm interested in pursuing a career in some of these fields. So I would say in general, I don't have a specific recommendation, but in general, like, don't worry too much about middle school because it's never going to go on the college admissions. What you can do is just really take that time to dig deeper into what your interests are, rather than like, oh, I'm going to do coding, right? Like, I think as a middle schooler, it's very hard to know, maybe in rare exceptions, if coding is going to be something that you absolutely love, or like writing or drawing or whatever it is. So it's probably better and more valuable to be able to do like 3 or 4 different activities and ask yourself, oh, which one was the most fun and why? Right. And if you do that for maybe 7th grade and 8th grade, well, going into high school, you have solved a problem that a lot of people don't even solve in college, which is, what do I want to do with my life? So I think middle school, A, just like don't worry too much about it, and then B, use it to explore widely rather than spending the whole summer doing one thing.
Charlie, do you have any?
Yes,
comments?
I totally agree with Jason. Definitely coding might be one of the choice, but I strongly suggest students, to explore more opportunities, more activities to figure out what's their real interest in their deep heart. We know this kind of a young age, if they find their mission or their passion, it will be a big impact on their whole life. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's all from the registration part. Let's go back to the chat box. I think Jason already answered some question, right? Oh, Jason, maybe you can pick some and answer it, so I don't need to read it. Yeah.
All right, so let me read. So I think I answered Eric's question in the chat. So Janice's question: will a ninth grader work for home business during coming summer not as competitive as doing unpaid internships outside? I don't think so. I think that when it comes to unpaid internships, 99% of high schoolers don't do any sort of internship. So there's no idea of like competition in that sense. Like it's very, in my opinion, from what I've seen, maybe things have changed a lot, but it's not that standard. So what matters more is what you're actually doing in each of these opportunities. So if you're going to do something that's like super cool in the internship, then go do the internship. If you're going to be doing something that's more interesting to you in the work for home business, then do that. There's not like a, standard level of competition. And in general, like doing either of those things in your summers is going to be seen as a plus. So it really depends on the specifics of which one is more interesting. Yu Hong asks, what are the most important things that you have learned from Stanford you will probably never learn or gain from other universities? How did you decide to go to Stanford? This is a good question. What are the most important things I've learned from Stanford that I never get from other universities? I think the thing that Stanford really instilled in me, and I think that instills in many students that go, is a sense that anything is possible. I had the opportunity to study abroad at Oxford, which is a very different university. It's thousands of years old. There's a college at Oxford called New College, and New College was founded in the 1600s before Stanford and the US even existed. So that's new at Oxford. But new at Stanford is quantum computing. It's like self-driving cars. It's going to space and back without destroying any of the rockets. So I think when you go to Stanford, you learn a healthy sense of doing things that are impossible. And I think that's also something that Google has taught me as well. But especially Stanford is just everyone there is so focused on the future and believes that they can be a big part of it. And I think that manifests itself in the sorts of companies that have come out of Stanford. The second part of that question is, how did you decide to go to Stanford? The two other schools I was mainly considering were MIT and Harvard, which are obviously both great institutions. I didn't decide to go to MIT because I'm interested in philosophy and the humanities. And I found that though MIT's engineering programs and science programs are great, they didn't have as much of a humanities presence at all. And they also weren't connected to Silicon Valley. So I was also very interested in startups. And Harvard, likewise, it was almost like the other side of MIT, where like I was interested in both engineering and philosophy. And Harvard was very good at philosophy, government, social sciences, but they had a very relatively weak, compared to MIT and Stanford, relatively weak computer science program. So for me, Stanford gave me the best of the humanities, the best of engineering, as well as proximity to Silicon Valley and working in tech and working in startups. Emma asks how to find volunteer opportunities for middle schoolers without experience. I think the most important thing is just ask. You would be surprised at how many places are willing to let people volunteer with no experience. So asking is the first step. But from my personal experience, the library is always a very safe bet. It's a very safe environment, shelving books. It might not be the most fun thing, but I also discovered a lot of new books that I read, just shelving things at the library. So that was something I recommend. It's a good start, but also more importantly, like, don't be afraid to ask, because there's no cost. The worst that they could say is no. And then lastly, I know we're running short on time. Eric has a question of any suggestions on how high schoolers could find internships. Is there a website for such opportunities? I don't think there's a website, just because technically, like, it's not super legal for companies to like try to hire high schoolers because they're underage. So you really should rely more on like informal networks and building your own opportunities through networking. I generally think that if you're looking for a somewhat more safe opportunity or like more conservative thing, I think you could just go go talk to small businesses and ask them if they need help like building their website. I think that's like something I've seen a lot of people do, is just there's so many small businesses that don't have good websites that many high schoolers can easily do a better job. And then that's a great gateway into building experience. Okay. can I just answer these last 3 questions really quickly? Or?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so the question is, I can think of how coaching helps high schoolers. What is my coaching focus on? So my coaching is mainly focused on college admissions, but I've also worked with middle schoolers. And when I work with middle schoolers, I focus more on developing motivation, developing good habits, picking their classes, and in general, like finding, helping them find their interests. So it's a lot earlier stage work, but I've worked with, for example, an 8th grader that just recently got into Stanford. So hopefully like maybe that was just him being a very smart person, but I do think that can help at that early stage. And then with high schoolers, I typically focus on more immediate tactical things. I'll brainstorm on your essays. I'll consider what your essays tell about you, make sure that each essay is saying something new about you rather than saying the same thing. I'll help you revise essays, help you figure out who are the best people to ask for your recommendations, how to structure your resume, things like that. What do I do for my interest in philosophy? I actually read a lot of philosophy in my free time. And at Stanford, I was mostly focused on political philosophy. So I think just watching the news, there's a lot of political philosophy to think about every single day. I think, there's just so many things going on in the world. So what I do for my interest in philosophy is I read a lot, and I have friends that are also interested, and we have reading groups to keep us kind of involved in that space. And Stanford also has political theory workshops where mostly PhD students and professors attend, but they're open to the public. So I go to those every Friday. And then the last question is, someone's daughter is interested in humanity. What are some recommendations that they can produce something instead of just attending summer camps? Humanity, I mean, that's awesome that, your daughter has like such an interest towards humanitarian causes. And I think that's like a very interesting and mature thing to be interested in. Yeah, so first of all, like that's great, kudos. What are some recommendations on producing instead of just attending summer camps? I think that the first step in order to produce something valuable and interesting is to identify what problem you want to solve. So humanity is pretty broad, but maybe there's a specific element of humanity that your daughter's interested in. It could be climate change, it could be poverty, it could be education. So just taking the poverty example, if this problem you want to solve is poverty, then zoom in a little bit more into your local community. Are there homeless shelters that require volunteering work? Are there sorts of like, are there lawmakers, senators perhaps, that need an intern to help them write about what they're doing or to help them do research? Through narrowing down, finding a problem and narrowing down to the specific local element of what you can actually do, that's a great mindset. So you can do a similar thing for climate. If you're interested in the climate, well, maybe there's a food bank or a sort of sustainable recycling center in your city that you can work on. Maybe you can start an initiative in your neighborhood with the homeowners association to use 10% less water every day or something, or like create posters to put around the neighborhood, whatever it may be. Once you find a problem and you narrow down, you can get a lot of ideas that way. Okay, I think that's everything. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll pass it back to Shanshan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Any more questions? Yeah. I think we answered all, right? Oh, the first question, how do you think about your cycle? Jason. One more question from Molly.
Let me unmute myself, sorry. I didn't personally study for this, but I had many friends who did. And similar competitions like the physics Olympiad and the math Olympiad. My advice is only do it. Well, 2 things. One, I keep on saying this, but it's because it's true. You really have to ask yourself, when I'm studying for USICO problems, am I having fun, or does it feel like I'm doing work? And you might think that most people think it's doing work, but I've met very many successful USICO competitors that genuinely love doing what, like no one had to tell them to go study this. That's a good sign. If no one is forcing you to do it, then by all means, please continue doing that, and I'm sure you will excel. Another thing to consider is, do you want to do research for a career, or are you potentially exploring research as a career? Certain universities that are more academically oriented, like MIT, care a little bit more about these sorts of tests and competitions. So if you want to go to MIT and be a math professor, a competing professor, maybe put more weight on the USICO and these competitions. But also if you want to be a professor and you don't like these sorts of things, don't do them. Do research instead. That's even more directly related. I think the common mistake is people find a competition like this, and it's easy because it's very obvious what you need to do to succeed, which is just study a lot. But you have to think about the opportunity cost. In that time that you were studying for an exam that maybe you're not even that interested in, and maybe your natural talents are very suited for, you could have been doing something that you found interesting and you could be excelling at. So don't think about just how straightforward it can be to like compete in the USCO. Think about what you could have done in that time and whether you would have liked to do that other thing, whatever it is, more.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Any comment from Charlie?
Yeah, I totally agree with Jason. Even though a lot of our students, they are interested in the USACO, mostly, yes, please do, because you are interested in that. Also enjoy working on that.
Yeah,
I think the purpose is, as Jason showed, find the T, most sharpened part of yourself and work on that. Be the best of you on that. You will be top in the world.
Yeah, I will give an extra example. One of our students who just finished the US Open, and he continued to doing coding problems on Codeforces for another 2 hours. So which takes almost 7 hours on coding today. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's all for the question part. Yeah, give it back to Charlie. Yeah.
Yes, I want to say thank you again, Jason, for coming to this seminar. I hope the students and the parents here can learn. Also, we have recorded this talk. We will put onto our YouTube channel. Hopefully, more of the students and parents can learn from this effort. Thank you again also for the parents and the students. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest. I want to say it again. One thing we need to do is find your interest, find your talent, find what you're good at, be yourself. That's the way we develop our child, develop our own character. You see already from Jason is one example here. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have
Yes.
a good night.
Bye.